I'm a big believer in a business plan. But every time I mention business plans, somebody says, Richard Branson didn't have one, Steve Jobs didn't have one, I never had one. And maybe they're right, but I suspect in Richard Branson's and Stephen Jobs' case, they just had other people create the business plan for them. I think business plans get a bad name because we're not always great at them. So I'm a big believer in a business plan. But every time I mention business plans, somebody says, well, Richard Branson didn't have one. Steve Jobs didn't have one. I never had one. And maybe they're right. But I suspect in Richard Branson's and Stephen Jobs' case, they just had other people create the business plan for them. But I think they're answering the wrong question. I came from corporate estate agency. We had a plan for everything. Not necessarily a huge 20-page document, but we always knew what we were trying to achieve and what good or success looked like. We were also very clear on how we were going to measure it. And the one thing we definitely did is that we reviewed those plans relentlessly. That discipline has stayed with me throughout my career, and probably why I am biased to being in favour of having a business plan. But I think business plans get a bad name because we're not always great at them. For many people, a business plan is something you write for the bank or something you write when you start a business, something that gets filed away and forgotten about at the bottom drawer. So if that's your experience, I completely understand why people don't bother with a business plan. I actually think and believe that sitting down and writing a business plan in itself is a phenomenal exercise. It really gets people to stop and think about their business, not because you produce a beautiful document. It forces you to just take a step back, a step away from the day-to-day, the blood and the bullets, the chaos. You get the opportunity to stop and think, where are we actually trying to get to? What's really important? What are we trying to build? What do you want this business to look like in 3 years' time? Those aren't questions most business owners ask themselves often enough. There's that very infamous line, and I'm guilty of using it a lot, of don't work in the business, work on the business. But actually, what does that mean? What are you supposed to actually do? For me, business planning is one of the best places to start if you want to work on your business and not just in the business. Because that's the moment you stop reacting and you start thinking about things strategically. Easy for you to say. But writing the plan is, of course, only half the job. The other half is actually having it live and breathe within your business. Because businesses change, markets change, people's change, plans need to change. So that's why reviewing a business plan is as important as actually sitting down and writing it. And as I say, the number of times I will turn up at a business and I'll say, have you got a business plan? And they start searching around in the bottom drawer to try and find it. They've got no idea where the business plan is. I already know I am going to add huge value to those people. And I think everybody needs to work on their cadence, what works for them. But from my point of view, I sit down every Saturday morning, cup of tea, and then I take a few quiet moments to think about the week that I've just been through, and then I plan my week ahead. Then again, at the end of every month, I stop and review the month. And then the other one that I do is quarterly. And I always find it interesting reflecting on my business plans to see what's changed, what direction I'm going in, what's next. And also, it can be quite reassuring because we tend to be really guilty of getting things done and just putting a tick next to them and moving on. We'll beat ourselves up for days on ends about stuff that we didn't do. But the stuff we have achieved, we forget about. So I quite enjoy sort of reminiscing, looking back at what I've managed to achieve over the last few months. I often talk about my perfect week. I'm really clear what my perfect week looks like. But I do wonder, when I ask that question of other people, they have no idea of what the perfect week looks like. So how could you possibly know whether you've had a great week or not? Do I always achieve the perfect week? No, of course not. Sometimes I'm still finishing one of my non-negotiables late on a Friday afternoon because I've been pulled in every direction imaginable. But I know what those non-negotiables are. I know what I'm aiming for, and that's the difference. I think this is the real value of a business plan. It makes you intentional. Without one, every opportunity looks like a good opportunity. Well, I often hear the line, you can't leave money on the table. Well, you can if it's taking you away in the wrong direction. You can if it's not as much money as other important tasks that you have to do. Another opportunity appears, then another, and before long you're running in 6 different directions. Instead, ask one simple question. Does this move us towards where we're trying to get to? Does it move us towards our goal? If yes, fantastic. But if not, leave it. That's not closing doors. That's keeping your business moving in the right direction you choose. The one thing I find about being intentional is that the opportunities to get me where I want to be tend to crop up. But I think those opportunities were always there. It's just that if you don't know where you want to be, it's very difficult to spot them as opportunities. A couple of years ago, I spent the day with my late friend Matt Beard when he was manager of Liverpool Ladies. What I was there doing is I wanted to understand how elite sports develops people. How do they coach? How do they improve? How do they review performance? And what struck me wasn't that they had a plan. Of course, they had a plan. What struck me was how often they reviewed it. Every training session, every match, every player, everything was reviewed, adjusted, and improved. Business should be exactly the same. It was a classic example of marginal gains. The other thing I love about a business plan is, well, it certainly helps me to stay accountable. And accountability is really important. The moment you've written something down, and particularly if you share it with people, you sort of feel obliged and committed to actually doing it. So do share your business plan. And if it's just you, that's okay. Share your business plan with your partner or somebody close to you. Because once you start telling people, this is what I plan to do, you'll be amazed how that instantly keeps you on the straight and narrow. The ideas are no longer in your head. Now you've said, this is what I'm going to do. And it's surprisingly uncomfortable not to follow through. That's one of the reasons I built my own business planning app. I managed to get myself up early one morning on a Sunday morning and I was playing with Manus AI. And again, I believe that this is how you learn, by just trying different things. And with the support of Manus, I managed to build a performance review app so that you can build your business plan in it and then it'll review that for you weekly, monthly. I didn't do that because I wanted another document. What I was doing is trying to create a system that helps people review progress every week, something to help them become accountable, something that keeps the plan alive. A business plan doesn't have to be complicated. For me, it answers a handful of questions. Where are we trying to get to? What are our priorities? What numbers matter? Because what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. What are the non-negotiables? And who owns what? When are we going to review it? So you can make a business plan as big or as small as you like. I get that some businesses are bigger and therefore more complex, so the plan needs to mirror that. But you can also have a really simplistic plan that just gets you very clear about what your priorities actually are. One of the 7 principles in my book, It's a Business, Not a Job, is about review, refine, repeat. Your business plan shouldn't be fixed. It should evolve, learn, adjust, improve, and then repeat. Exactly like the elite sports, exactly like the best businesses. The businesses that make the biggest progress aren't necessarily the cleverest. They're usually the most intentional. They know where they're going. And because they know where they're going, they recognize the opportunities worth pursuing. Just as importantly, they recognize distractions that are worth ignoring. I used to work with a business partner who would have 100 good ideas a day, but most of them were just distractions, just pulling us off target, from the direction we needed to actually go. Being able to ignore those distractions is really important if you want to end up in the right place at the end. So writing the plan matters. Reviewing the plan matters. But living the plan matters even more, because working on the business isn't a slogan. It's a habit. And if you've ever wondered where to start, I'd start with your business plan.